Today I'm at the Ford headquarters in Dearborn, Michigan. The building in front of me that is designed to look like Independence Hall in Philadelphia houses the Henry Ford Museum, full of historical items of American history and cultural significance. And to the right, down the way, is Henry Ford's Greenfield village. As a car innovator, Henry Ford revolutionized the world by creating the assembly line and making cars affordable for the average person. He becomes one of the world's richest men in the process. The Ford Model T became a massive hit and made road trips a possibility for average people for the first time in history, and turned Ford into a massive powerhouse of a company. Henry grew up in Dearborn, on the outskirts of Detroit, just a few miles from Greenfield Village, and his automotive plant. Henry Ford was also a big history buff, and saw the rapidly changing America from the Industrial Revolution and wanted to preserve those pieces of the past. So he started buying up historical homes to preserve them for the future. He brought them here and created Greenfield Village, basically an outdoor living history museum. It's kind of like a small city made up of historical houses, buildings, and transport. Kind of a history lover's Disneyland. Not only are there houses and laboratories and workshops of historical figures, but even shops and restaurants from the past, from all across America, that were brought here. The transportation inside is historical as well. 1800s era trains, early 1930s buses, horse and carriages, Ford Model T cars going up and down the roads. There are even working farms and a baseball field in the back, where on the weekends, in summertime, they play baseball games wearing 1867 jerseys and playing by 1867 rules. Gloves are optional. Here's my bracelet. That is for unlimited Model T rides on the train, and a vintage carousel there. And then this is my ticket to Greenfield Village, the Henry Ford Museum, and the factory tour. Here's the entrance. Look at the train sitting there. It has a very Disneyland-esque feel to it. And the workers are all dressed in period costumes for where they are stationed at. Walking through the front gates with the music playing, it really does have a Disneyland-esque feel. Now the first thing I wanted to do was to take a train ride on this here steam train around the village, and that is exactly what I did. But I'm going to save that for another video where you can just watch the train ride in its entirety around the village. So let's continue now. This scene, I have just finished my train ride. Let's check out the village on foot. Now it is summertime, so I was definitely hoping for better weather, but of course I do not have the world's best luck, and so it did rain several times. But I can't control the weather, so you just have to roll with what you're dealt. Now, I will try to explain a little bit about each thing that you're seeing along the way. There is a working farms area in Greenfield Village, including the 1880s era Firestone Farm, and they grew soybeans among other things there. And this building, the Soybean Experimental Laboratory, was built here in 1930. Henry Ford actually hired people to study and document plant properties to align with industrial uses here. This yellow building was a wagon shop owned by wagon makers Robert and William Richard. They built, fixed, and painted wagons in this shop, and even fixed tools. This building was built in 1847 in Macon, Michigan, and brought to Greenfield Village in 1941. The Richards remained in business, building and fixing wagons for over 50 years.
Before they had power and machines, they had to make all this by hand, all those saws over there.
That loud clomping is not me, but a horse and carriage ride going down the street. Now here's the working farms area that I was referring to earlier. This area does indeed smell like a farm.
I don't think it's stinky.
It's a little bit stinky. Not terrible though. Steep Street, Ford Road. Alright, school children that way, let's go this way. Must be some kind of a summer camp or something, because school should not be in session now. This is the William Ford Barn, built by Henry's father William in 1863, and was located just across from their farmhouse. Henry Ford brought it to the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, and today, the Greenfield horses are groomed and harnessed here for their day's work.
What's it for that?
It is rather humid today. I can understand needing a spritz. I would think that you would feel like a horse's rear end if you did not want one. There's the train leaving again. And if I horse and carriage leave, and here comes a Model T down the road. Sharp left. There goes the train leaving again. All aboard. Armington and Sims, machine shop and foundry. Looks like there's a path to walk through here. I don't think they're going to be upset. It seems to have been trodden on quite a few times. Built in 1929, Armington and Sims is a recreation of an early 1900s machine shop. Hi. And of course the rain has begun. How exciting. this is the place where the Model T rides leave from. I will be taking a ride on one later in the day. Coming up now on a 1/4 scale replica of the original Ford factory, located in nearby Detroit.
We're not allowed to go in. Yes, we are. No. Yes, we go in. Do that. No.
Let's stop.
Whoa. We don't have to touch you.
Alright, that is why I went the opposite direction. We are currently on Main Street, where a lot of the popular structures are located. You just saw a replica of the first Ford factory. Further down that way is, among other things, the Wright Brothers Cycle Shop and the Wright Brothers home. Directly in front of us is a replica of the school that Henry Ford attended, which was about 2 miles from his house. So here's a rebuilt replica of the school that Henry Ford went to. This one was built in 1943. He went to school in the 1800s. And the Ford Company building here is rebuilt. It was a quarter. This one is a quarter of the size of the original one. Let me go back down here, backtrack a little bit before I go forward, since we went around the other way. Down the way you can see Henry Ford's childhood home. But first, a Stover model windmill. This is an 1880s Stover model windmill that was located in Versailles, Missouri. Stover windmills were the most popular windmill models in the country at the time. These windmills were used on farms such as the one Henry's dad owned all across the country. They helped bring groundwater up for the animals, and they ran equipment like corn shellers, grain grinders, and portable sawmills. So this is the actual home that Henry Ford was born in here. Yes, Henry Ford was born and raised in this farmhouse, built in 1860 or 61. It was located just a few miles from where it is today in Greenfield Village. Henry didn't like doing farm work. He was always more interested in machines. He wanted to think of a way to make farm work easier using machines. At the age of 16, he moved to Detroit to become a machinist. By 1919, he'd already become a wealthy businessman and began trying to preserve history, including his own. He restored the house's furnishings to the way it was decorated in 1876, the year his mother died. It wasn't until 1944 that he finally moved the house to its current location in Greenfield Village.
This is the original structure where Henry Ford was born and raised, and we are showing you the year 1876, which is when Henry was 13.
Is there any particular reason for that year?
Yes. So one, it's the centennial of the country. And two, it is unfortunately the year his mother passes.
Yeah.
So we like to think that he brought it back to this year so that she would feel at home if she were to ever walk through the door. Yeah. So in her memory, and to the best of their memory, what was in the house during that time.
That's pretty awesome. You mind if you guys are on video? Is that a problem?
Oh, that's fine. For with me.
I don't like to just record somebody without telling
Well,
them.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Here's the kitchen of Henry Ford.
This was down on about 10 years later, so in 1876 it would have been here.
Okay.
As the family grew, the kitchen just kept getting pushed back.
Grandma Hope drugs. And she always had this in her
George Washington back there.
living room. Yeah, she was like a boardroom. Yeah. I'll show you.
Okay, leaving the Henry Ford home, and it's raining, of course, but this is interesting. It's definitely a different rain than Seattle. Usually Seattle, if it's raining, that's like cool, cold. This is more like a tropical place kind of rain, which I didn't expect being this far north. But yeah, it's very humid, muggy. One more look at Henry Ford's house as a horse and carriage goes by. Unfortunately, I was a little low on the shot, but oh well, I tried. This is a replica of Henry Ford's Bagley Avenue workshop, built with some original bricks from the 58 Bagley Avenue duplex. Henry lived at 58 Bagley Avenue in Detroit with his wife Clara. Along with some of his friends, Henry built his first automobile, a quadricycle, in 1896 in this shed/workshop in the back of that duplex. He founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903, 7 years later.
So the next time you hop in your car, turn the key and press the gas pedal, just remember, the man who brought the automobile to the masses started it all in a little shed. And of course, Clara's kitchen sink.
We'll take a Model T ride later. Let's keep looking around now. Alright, we're back. There's his house, the old windmill there, the school, the first Ford factory, and let's continue down Main Street. The rain seems to have subsided. Comes the Model T. Another one pulling up over there. This is Cohen Millinery. It was built in about 1880 in Detroit, Michigan, and the business was run by Elizabeth Cohen in the 1890s, who was a young widow. She designed hats in seasonal styles in her shop, and sold other accessories downstairs, and lived in the upstairs, which reduced the cost of living, and also made it easy for her to take care of her 4 young children, since she was a widow.
That's right.
But in this period, they're drawing socks, crochet cotton. They did a lot of crocheting. Of course.
What's the, what's this space?
Ladies' hats. Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Good, thank you.
Now these 2 buildings are among the real highlights for me in Greenfield Village. The brick building to the right is the cycle shop where Orville and Wilbur Wright built bicycles, and eventually invented the airplane inside there. And the white building to our left is the house that they were born and raised in. And of course, both the cycle shop and the house were originally in Dayton, Ohio, and moved here to Greenfield Village in 1936.
I agree.
But before we head into the Wright cycle shop, take a look back across the street. You see Cohen Millinery that we just left, and the brick building to its right, with the green shutters, is the Heinz House, where Henry Heinz started his famous condiment company out of his parents' basement in 1869 in Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh. The house was built in 1854 and came to Greenfield Village 100 years later. The Heinz Company is most famous for their ketchup, steak sauce, and 57 varieties of condiments to make your food taste better. To this day, Heinz is by far the biggest selling ketchup brand in the world, and it's not even close. Now, let's go into the shop, where the first airplane was built.
Yes, I one of the privileged ones. I think next door they do have air conditioning today. And then there's Heinz House that has air conditioning. Webster has air conditioning. In Ohio. And this Wright bicycle shop, it was where the Wright brothers rented out space in 1897 to literally become their bicycle factory. They're able to actually build their own type of bicycle back in the machine shop and then sell it to the public and repair it if need be. So hence cutting out the middlemen, cutting out the distributors that they used to have to buy bicycles from to sell them. And so they're saving a lot of money. And so with this money, that's actually what they're using towards the research and experimentation and finally development of the first ever Wright Flyer, which of course they built in the machine shop where they built their bicycles. And so the bicycle actually encouraged that Flyer, because in some cases you have chains and gears, which they also used in the airplane and other things like that. And so it was a pretty amazing deal, you know, at that time. Now, of course, they flew it in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, though, and this is because in Kitty Hawk they are very windy, but also very sandy beaches for any crash landings accidentally. Of course, it's a little bit softer than Ohio dirt, and then finally it's very secluded, so then you don't really have to worry about people coming up to you asking what you're doing.
Right.
And so in the end, they're able to build the airplane bisection in the back machine shop, and then they took those sections, sent them down to Kitty Hawk, reassembled them by December 17th, 1903. Actually, they reassembled them by December 14th, but then Wilbur crashed the plane. And so then they had to try it 3 days later, which then Orville sent them up into the air for 12 seconds, 120 feet long and only 10 feet up in the air. But that right there, the first track, was enough to change the world forever. It was only 65 years after that moment in time, Neil Armstrong was up on the moon. So there we go. Yep. Well, thank you very much, and go ahead and look around. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Bicycle shop. So the Wright cycle shop, to be exact. And this bicycle shop, this is where the Wright brothers were worth a type of bicycle.
Remember that plane up there at the Air Museum?
Bernoulli's principle shows how higher pressure keeps it raised.
very cool. This is literally the reason I'm able to take a plane and fly here.
I don't want you to spin it. That would be really cool to see. So that spins, pushes air through it, makes that plane go in here.
Good shot. Here's where they were building their airplane. Amazing. And these guys had just a high school education. Taught themselves. There's the first Wright flyer, the very first flight. Orville Wright. Should be at the pilot there. Should be Wilbur there. And there's where they built it. Pretty freaking incredible.
Well, for me as a history buff, it doesn't get too much cooler than to be able to go into the cycle shop and see the exact place where Orville Wright and Wilbur Wright invented the world's first airplane. These guys in this place are the reason why the world has gotten so much smaller and more accessible. The course of human history is so much different because of what happened in this building. Incredible.
Well, the Wright Cycle Company shop, where the airplane was invented. If you don't find that cool, you're not a fan of history. This Greenfield village is definitely a history lover's dream.
Hi. Well, how are you?
All right, next door, another awesome place. This is the Wright brothers' house.
Orville and Wilbur did not grow up with a lot of money. There were 7 children in the house, and their father was a Christian bishop.
Then they're the
Like most of the houses and buildings in Greenfield Village, you are allowed to go inside, so let's go in.
Smith. This is what the Wright brothers. Yeah. Wow, thank you. You're welcome.
Did I get all that?
Father's Irish English. Yeah. So the father's a bishop, so was traveling around. Was assigned to a church in Dayton, Ohio. So they had this house built for $1,500 in Dayton, Ohio, on Hawthorne Street. It's 2 rooms, but 1 entrance. And another entrance is half wall. Yes. This lovely place. And we don't have the children, so I need a descendant.
This is Catherine's bedroom.
They never had children. They were so busy into.
This is the bedroom Orville and Wilbur grew up in.
The bug for flight from this little toy here. This is what started their interest. Their father would travel a lot.
Wow, how cool.
So he
He's
brought
giving me
these homes to the boys.
special access up here.
And that's what they spent in flight.
This is the mother and father's shop. Yeah, this is the mother and father's bedroom.
So wrapped up in that. I think Orville, you mentioned, might have had a girlfriend.
Well, it
Wilbur did. I
was years later. Sir Catherine's, the middle bedroom will be a bedroom shared by Orville and Wilbur, which is a half a wall separating them.
How great is this? Walking in the Wright brothers' house. Without them, How far back would technology be? "65 years after they make that first flight, 120 feet in 12 seconds, just 10 feet off the ground, and 65 years later, men are walking on the moon." They triggered an explosion of technology. I've read the McCullough, David McCullough's biography on the Wright brothers, and if you haven't read it, I do recommend it.
In Ohio, and then they
I guess he came here for 3 days doing research.
Yeah, okay, they were born in their house.
I want to go to the college. I want to go to the general
There's a statue of Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison was Henry Ford's biggest hero. The man acquired 1,093 patents and was instrumental in building the modern world. This statue is located on the edge of the area of Greenfield village called Edison at Work, with the highlight being Edison's Menlo Park laboratory, which we are headed to now. But first, let's check out this post office. This is the Phoenixville Post Office. The building dates back to 1825 and was located in Phoenixville, Connecticut. The building started off as a general store, then became a general store and post office, and then became just a post office. The post office officially closed in 1910. This was a time when people came to the post office to pick up their mail, before it started being delivered directly to people's homes. During its last decade of use, this post office got to see the big fad of the early 1900s, when sending lots of postcards became extremely popular. Here we are entering the Menlo Park Complex, also known as Edison's Invention Factory, where Edison and his assistants churned out some of the world's most influential and important inventions, including the phonograph, which is the first machine that could record and play back sound, the first practical lighting system, major improvements to the telephone and the electric railway, and many, many others. Even Menlo Park itself is a great contribution to the world. It was the world's first research and development lab, which paved the way for future industrial research facilities. Its importance cannot be overstated.
Edison's nickname was the Wizard of Menlo Park.
This building is the Menlo Park Machine Shop. Now a little bit of history. On October 21st, 1879, Edison first successfully illuminated his incandescent lamp. General Electric Company was hoping to have a big celebration event for the 50th anniversary, but Edison had already agreed to celebrate it at Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan, with Henry Ford. So, on October 21st, 1929, Edison came to celebrate what was known as Light's Golden Jubilee, and dedicated Henry Ford's new museum, which he opened up just on time for it. It was a massive star-studded event. In addition to, of course, Henry Ford and Edison being there, in attendance there was also American President Herbert Hoover, airplane inventor Orville Wright, two-time Nobel Prize-winning physicist Marie Curie, business mogul John D. Rockefeller, automotive pioneer Walter Chrysler, actor Will Rogers, and many other luminaries. Albert Einstein was not in attendance, but praised Edison through a radio address from Germany. Ford gave Edison a tour of his Rouge plant, which I will show in an upcoming video, and the guests gathered at the Eagle Tavern restaurant in Greenfield Village for lunch, which I will be showing later in this Greenfield Village tour. Edison did a reenactment of his lighting of the first electric light bulb from 50 years earlier. It was broadcast on NBC radio as the nation's first live radio broadcast, while millions tuned in. It was a massive undertaking to recreate Edison's huge Menlo Park, New Jersey complex. Some of the buildings were removed from the original site intact, and others were reconstructed from salvaged parts or recreated on site. Edison approved of it and encouraged it, and helped as well, donating hundreds of historical artifacts himself.
Basically, this is where Thomas Edison and his group of researchers, lab assistants, skilled assistants, etc., were working towards making major innovations. Things like the phonograph, first machine to record and play back sound. Things like the direct current electric system, where they would generate electricity and distribute it to many places at once. Of course, also one of the most important ones is the incandescent light bulb, recreations of which you can see all throughout the building. Now, a lot of the main experimentation happened upstairs. At this downstairs area, you can think of as kind of playing a supporting role to what was going on upstairs, making materials and different testing equipment and experiments to try and figure out things for upstairs, like what kind of materials could be useful for their electrical systems, what could be used for filaments, etc. A lot of that was support for what was going on upstairs in that main second floor laboratory, which is the heart of the complex. So I highly recommend eventually, when you're ready, going to the upstairs where you can learn a little bit more about that first successful experiment with the incandescent light bulb. But before you do, I wanted to show you this little map of kind of the area of Menlo Park where it was been located originally. Let's see here. Here we go. This is what it looks like. I kind of circled it right around here. You can kind of see New York City's over here, so it's a little bit further away from all the noise and distractions, right? But still close enough where people, specifically investors that Thomas Edison had, could come in and check on inventions that they would own either the future rights to or they owned outright. and they could see what was happening here in the laboratory. But it was also far enough away where it wasn't so distracting. So that's why they chose the site initially. This was one of their production models. There was about 600 of these of this model. And what happened was they would take these and they would lease them out for about $100 a year. And they would take these to parties and social gatherings, and people who were absolutely astounded at the time, hearing their voice being recorded and then played back to them. You know, this was—
Where can I buy one? Where can I buy one?
So that's how they made their money back, is charging a certain amount of money for people to record and hear their own, you know, voices back to them.
Sure. Yeah.
The phonograph, the world's first sound recording machine.
Fantastic piece of machinery, if you ask me.
And what is this over here?
This is a type of hydraulic press. They could even get in steam power. That presses into that foil a little bit when it's caused by the vibration coming in through this mica diaphragm, and that makes the needle vibrate and move into the foil like those little marks that you see there.
That's incredible.
And then rewinding over and playing the needle back over those indents is what causes the needle to vibrate and push the vibration back out through the diaphragm as a sound that you would just record.
That's so cool.
Simply astounding and fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi there.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Thanks, Joey.
Oh, I'm doing just fine, thank you. I appreciate it. Welcome to Menlo Park, by the way. The Edison who had collected just a bunch of the stuff that they had used throughout the years working at Edison. So they called them up and said, hey, can you have that stuff? And basically all of them said, oh yeah, take it. This is awesome. It's all junk, we don't want it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the good info today.
Of course. How y'all doing?
Hey.
Done here. The tinfoil phonograph is also done here. Out of Edison's 1,093 patents, over 400 of them were done in the Menlo Park facility.
Wow.
So quite a few.
Yeah, that's
This
crazy.
place was only open for about 10 years as well. And so after Edison, after Edison illuminates Menlo Park, things move really fast for him. He's only here for about 5-6 years, but his employees are still here working independently for him, though.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's gone. He's moving over to the wiring up New York and stuff like that, and he's just moving and grooving because after he illuminates Menlo Park, New Jersey, that's when things really spring into
Everybody
action.
wanted it in there. Yeah.
And so, because this is the first electric wiring system. People had invented, light bulbs before him. They were just extremely inefficient, and they didn't have a wiring system such as this to actually be usable for practical purposes, like Edison's was. And so he wires up 4 houses, the lab complex here, and then also constructs a lot of streetlights as well. And thousands of people come down to Menlo Park New Year's Eve of 1879 just to see him flip the switch for the very first time. Because there's the houses, like we have Sarah Jordan's boarding house there. That was the first house to be wired for electricity. There's not a light switch in it. No light switches in any of the houses. There's one switch that controlled every single light in Menlo Park. So everything was on or everything was off. And thousands of people came down to see him flip that switch for the very first time for the public to see.
I'll bet.
And so after that, people like the Vanderbilts came, they wanted the wiring system and whatnot, so they bought it from him to put into their parlor. The people from New York, the investors, were very, very impressed. And other than wiring up the town of Menlo Park for them, he brought them up here to kind of schmooze them over. He hooked up a sewing machine to a motor and had that running all night long the entire time they were there. And that was part of the reasoning that they allowed him to tear up the roads, put the power cables in, construct the Pearl Street station, and then wire up Wall Street.
Wow.
There are 11,000 songs on my phone right now.
Yeah, that's crazy. Started it all with a tinfoil phonograph.
It's one of my favorite things he's ever done.
Yeah, to me that might be the most impressive even. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could even think to record something on tinfoil. It's just
Man. Do you know why he chose tinfoil?
It works out to be the perfect medium, but he also had it in ample supply.
Yeah,
so a lot of the batteries they're making in this lab are made out of tin and mica. So capacitors, those square batteries, see them all over downstairs, up here. Those generally are made out of tin separated by mica. So both things that you had a lot of. So you may as well try it.
Right.
But
Makes
tin
sense.
has some properties that make it the only thing that really would work that way.
Yeah.
Because tin doesn't harden when it bends. That means it doesn't get brittle, and so it won't tear when you go around to play it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Does the pipe organ work?
It does.
Leaving Menlo Park now. You can see the train tracks there.
There's a few more buildings as we're on the edge of Menlo Park. Here is Edison's Menlo Park office and library.
Old-fashioned bus that goes around the little village stops here.
This is my finger getting in the way. And this is the Sarah Jordan boarding house. This house was actually the same distance from Menlo Park as it currently is from the Menlo Park and Greenfield village. More than a dozen unmarried male Menlo Park workers lived in this boarding house, and this was among the first houses to be wired for electric light in the world. It was one of 3 private residences wired for Edison's new electrical lighting system in 1879. And the only one that still exists.
This house was wired with electricity, and the rest of the world was still in the dark.
Now this room. I'll pick up after these 3, but it's the last time. Everyone knows what I'll find on the floor. In the room next door, it's Mr. Holmes. You can tell which things are his, girly pictures and fancy bay rum. One day I even saw a knife on the dresser. He's a bit wild next to young Mr. Hipple and smart Mr. Lawson. But the others seem a bit long, most of the time. Now what's left? Finish the bedrooms. Try to get this all done before me. There's still bed.
And rounding out the Thomas Edison buildings, here is Thomas Edison's Fort Myers Laboratory. Because even when Edison was on vacation, he wanted to keep working. He built this lab in 1885 so he could continue experimenting with projects he was working on in New Jersey at Menlo Park. During the winter months, he spent in Fort Myers, Florida.
In Fort Myers, where we went. Oh, this building was, yeah.
Oh. Did you see it down there too, or they moved it?
No, they moved it here.
Oh, okay.
Look, that sign.
It wasn't home and workspaces.
His home basically is a workspace.
We have to come back. We're going this way.
It's here. Sorry about the little bump there. I was pulling up my camera to take a picture at the same time.
Now this next area, as you can see, is called the Porches and Parlors District.
Go across the bridge.
This is the Rocks Village Toll House. If you hate paying tolls to go on a road and think they are something new, you might be surprised that Americans have been paying tolls to go on roads since the 1600s, and I'm sure they've hated them just as long. This toll house was built in 1828 in Rocks Village, Massachusetts. People were charged the toll at this booth to cross the Merrimack River between Haverhill and West Newbury, Massachusetts. This is cool because it's a piece of history. But if I'm in my normal life, the only kind of toll house I want to see is a cookie. Well, that's going to do it for part 1 of my Greenfield Village tour. Come back and check out part 2, as I'm about to cross the Ackley Covered Bridge straight ahead. And there's many more cool historical homes and buildings to see.